So distribution seems like it's got a lot of pieces to it, but it actually flows together in a somewhat straightforward and simple story. So I have a company, and what do I want to do? I want to line my product and connect it to a customer. And so the way I go about doing this, the process and structure of doing this, is what we call distribution. So what's the basis and basics of distribution? We want to inform our customers, educate them. We want to be able to transact business. We're going to have to be able to supply. We want to be able to deliver our products, and we want to support it. And this gives us opportunities to upsell or cross-sell or to continue business. We want to create a relationship. And so in order to create that relationship, we need some kind of conduit. And that conduit is called a channel. And so, but how do I pick a channel? Which ones work for me? And so in making a choice, the first thing I have to consider is what's my metric? Is this purely about financial, that I need to make a profit? Or are there other factors that go in here? Like I'm trying to get market share. I want to get customer growth. Or maybe I need to support my brand. Also, I think about strategically, what are the things I want to do? Like, how does this put me against the competition? One thing you see in a lot of acquisitions, you look at it and you say, that makes absolutely no sense why they bought that company. But sometimes companies buy other companies quite simply because they want the channels. Essentially, for example, Sears, no, that's not a good example. Sears buying Kmart. That was a bit of a disaster. But when Time Warner, for example, or I should say AOL bought Time Warner, it's because AOL had 20 million eyeballs at the time, which doesn't seem like a lot, but back then it was a lot. And they needed content to feed them. On the other hand, other companies have bought companies quite simply because they want the channels, they want the sales force, everything else that goes into it, because these things take a lot to build. And so what are my options? Well, it's a difference between verticals, which are the steps through my distribution, versus horizontals, which are my different options of doing something. For example, when I sell things, do I do it online? Do I do it through retailers? Do I do it through partners? And finally, the big things I need to consider when I'm looking at these different options is logistics versus information. Meaning, do I have the kind of for example, if I have a software product, I don't really care about logistics. I mean, they're just going to download it, or they're going to use it in the cloud. On the other, so therefore, I'm more interested about education and information. On the other hand, if I'm selling a bunch of screws or widgets or something, and I need to sell billions of these things, all of a sudden logistics becomes a big issue. And so I have to look at it with regards to my vertical and my horizontal. Manufacturers versus distributors. Are they, or do I just do it myself? Essentially, which one of those is going to control the game? Who's going to have the biggest impact? And finally, power versus control. Power is, are there certain things that I have where I can exert influence on them? For example, if you just made a brand new salsa and Costco decides they're going to sell it for you, well, you don't have too much control over Costco unless you're like one of their top 2 best sellers. Costco is basically going to dictate to you what you can do. You don't really have a lot of power in this situation. On the other hand, if you're Apple and you sit there and you say to Target, I don't think you're giving us enough margin. Maybe we're going to pull our phones from your store. Also, control and who controls their product. Apple tends to have a lot more impact on how their products are displayed, making sure people are trained, because Apple is very wary about their brand. And so no matter where you sell an Apple product, you want that Apple brand to come through. On the other hand, certain products have no control. Again, going back to the salsa, of where it's staged or how it's sold. So essentially, a big part of distribution is about managing conflict. And so how do I solve this conflict people fighting? One, keep them separated. And that's it. You take this business, you take this business. You're in the luxury business, you're in the education business. And so all of a sudden, your product's segmented. On the other hand, if you can't segment it, like all we do is sell our product to schools, well, then it's like, okay, this is a pie. This is how much money we're going to make from the pie. You get a 25% piece and you get a 25% piece. There. It's like your kids. I love you equally. Although I know my dad liked my sister better. And so managing is about this exercise of power and control. So what are some of the great conflicts? What about digital versus physical channels? Well, a lot depends on how much richness and reach do I need. If I have a pure digital product and I'm not all that concerned about richness, then I don't have to, then I can lean towards digital. On the other hand, if I have a physical product, then all of a sudden now resellers and people like that I have to take into consideration. So a lot depends on what the nature of my customer is. Manufacturers versus distributors. They don't like each other, they don't respect each other. And what it comes down to is my product better geared for volume or is it better geared for margin? Manufacturers need volume. They have a lot of overhead and they need to sell a lot. On the other hand, distributors don't have much lower overhead, therefore they want margin. And what it comes down to is the relationship that you make with them. How do you manage power and control? Direct selling versus using distributors. And what it comes down to is, am I going to segment it? Are we going to make it equal? Or is the pie so big? It's like, you want 3% of a lot? Or do you want 30% of nothing? And so basically you exert control over them and say, hey, take it or leave it. What about your horizontals? What if your horizontals are fighting each other? Well, the best solutions you have is either to segment, give them different unique parts for their products, or make it equal. And finally, me as a company versus those gray retailers. And the options I have there are either to beat them or join them. So as you can see, distribution is an extremely important part of marketing. And it's not as sexy as price or product features or things like that. But especially for physical products, when you see all the cost involved in it and all the coordination, it has a huge impact on your sales. And so what it comes down to is picking the right channel and then making it run optimally, which is about managing these conflicts and making sure that everyone's happy.